to Polymer Clay TV. Kira here, showing you how to use some wonderful texture tools and sculpting tools in the shop today. So you can find almost everything I'm going to show you at the shop at Polymer Clay TV, and I just easily created this pretty flower that has this great big rhinestone in the middle, and it's set almost flush because of one of the techniques that I'm going to show you. And this set of textures here. So let's get started. This is our rubber tipped tool set, and there are two different types of tools here. We've got the blue tips, which are quite flexible, soft and flexible rubber, and they come in 5 different tips. So you've got this pointed chisel tip, which is great for getting into small areas with that tip there. You've got this cup shape, a rounded bullet shape, also awesome for getting into small spaces, this regular chisel, and then this one, which is kind of like a cup and a chisel together. The red tip tools, we have 2 chisels, and these are quite firm rubber. They do bend, but they're a lot firmer than the other ones, so of course they're going to come in handy for other types of things. So basically these 2 tools are very similar. They both have the chisel tip, but this one I would say is medium firm, and the one with the lighter handle is very firm. And then on the bottom they have a pointed bullet tip. So this one, again, very firm. This one, a medium firmness. And then this one has small. This one's also, you can see, quite flexible. It's easy to move it around. But these are an interesting rounded, pointed shape. So you will find a purpose for all of these, I'm sure. And I'm going to show you a couple different things here. I have my roller. I have a set of wing stamps, and this is actually, the wings are going in to the stamp. So the stamp surface is flat, and the wings, when you stamp them, will be like raised up from the surface. This is called a fine line stamp. It's extremely shallow, but the design was interesting, so I liked it and I picked it up. And then I have a flower mandala from the shop at Polymer Clay TV, and the plum flower, which I like to use my cutters and my stamping tools together. So I'm going to show you how those would work and why I might want to use these with a tool like this. So I brought this stamp out to show you an idea of why you might want to have tools like this in your studio. So I'm just going to mold these top wings right here. Basically, this type of stamp works more like a mold than an actual rubber stamp, in my opinion. I believe I got the wings that you're looking at a site called Cool Tools. So you can see that this top one has actually created wings that are popping out of the clay surface. They're not impressed into it. So what I'm going to do next is just take an X-Acto blade and cut around the wings. And just remove them from the clay. I actually have a set that are finished that I'm going to show you in a minute. I just want to give you a couple little ideas about why you might want to have tools like this in your studio. So if I remove that wing so I can work on it alone. Okay, what I'll do next is come in with my tools and make all of these areas deeper just by getting in there and pressing down. This is the chisel tip, and really helping to define those spaces between the feathers. And then what you can do is even use your tools to change the shape, because right here you can see, like, maybe I want this to be a little bit more swooping, so I can round out the edge and then pull the shape up so that it's going to swoop instead of going outward. And then you can use these smaller ones to really press in the bottoms. You've got a whole arsenal of shapes here that you can use. This chisel is probably the one I use the most, because you can really get into the side of things and press on it. It's really good for rounding out a design that you might, say, want to mold in the future, because you've got to have rounded edges on things that you want to mold. You can't have what's called undercuts, which means the molding material would go up and underneath of it, and then you wouldn't be able to get the piece out. So you want the edges rounded, and when you've got a shape that's you can roll in your hand to create that rounded edge, it's really cool. And then you can completely change the dynamic by using your tools to create texture on something that's already molded, so that you can make like more feathery look. You can change the look of how these feathers come out. So now what you're doing is you're taking someone else's initial idea, which would be the mold itself, and you're changing how it looks and making it yours. You can elongate the bottom, pull it out, maybe even elongate the top by pulling on it. Give it a little twirl. And you can just keep coming back with your various tools to change how the molded object looks. So that's one really important use for your tool set. Okay, and then the other thing, the reason I brought this stamp out, because this is a fine line stamp, so it is really fine. The design that you get from it is not very raised. I'm just going to give it a once over with my acrylic roller. Okay, see how fine that is? You might not even be able to see it on camera, but I'll get close up. Okay, and what I would do then is pick areas and use my tools to further define what's going on there. So this process takes, quite a long time of just sitting with your project and deciding how you want it to look, because these tools will add texture as well as shapes, but you've got to, take your time with it. But here it's like I can use a stamp that maybe isn't deep enough for my intention and use my tools to trace along those shapes and make them deeper so that I can texture it later, add some powders or whatever, and really create a design that's more mine than what came out of the stamp. So you have so many different tips that you can use for this process. So you just pick the rubber tip that does what you want it to do. Okay, and I wanted to show you the finished process here from this stamp that was sort of flat. I created these feather and wing shapes that I could then mold, and I actually put them on a marble tile, and now they're stuck to it. I didn't pull them off ever, so that I could put some amazing mold putty on it and actually turn these into molded shapes. So you can see they're quite raised. And all I did is the process I just showed you of cutting out the wing shape and then enhancing it and deepening it with my rubber tools. So now I feel that these wings are like, you know, more mine now because I changed them a little bit and I also turned them into these three-dimensional pieces. Now along the same lines, I'm going to take a flower mandala, which is actually more of a press. It's not a cutter. If you press this all the way down into your clay is going to get all stuck in there. So really, you want to press on the clay. And then pull it out. So you have this shape. And then I am going to use my plunger cutter here and line it up with the shape. Oops, cat hair. And then I'm going to press it out. And this one, of course, you can press all the way down. So now I have this combination of the outline of the plum blossom with the design of the flower mandala, and those came from the Polymer Clay TV shop. And now I can play, because now I have all of my fun tip shapes here. And of course, you can use these for mark making. So we have this cup shape that makes almost a petal on its own. Okay, you have this, which is a cupped chisel. So it has a chisel, a nice defined rectangular mark there. And then this one, I would say, is really useful for sculpting, for when you want to round out an edge. Okay, because sometimes our fingers don't get into all the spaces, especially if you're making things that are small, or if you're making figures. This is really great if you're into figure sculpting. But this cup shape will help you sort of round and smooth. And these are really great for seam blending because they're very soft. Okay, so that's the cup shaped chisel. And then you have, of course, a bullet tip, which is great for making soft indented shapes. You have a flat chisel, which not like the cup shaped chisel has this rectangular texture. This one is going to have a defined, more sharp texture, and it's really going to be good for getting down into things, for like fixing these sort of edges, for making seams, and for what I'm thinking would be great, like if you're doing a figure, for defining the edges between body parts, like between an arm and a torso. If you're going to create an arm for a small figure and you need to bend the elbow, this is a perfect tool for setting the elbow and just giving it a little elbow crease, and also holding on to it while you form the outside parts of that joint. So it's a great tool for getting into these small spaces and making those tight turns. So that's the flat chisel. And then, of course, you also have this, which is my favorite one. And we have it in the three different, like this, the very firm, the medium firm, and the soft. This shape, I think, is the most versatile. So it's not one that I generally use for texture marks, although it works really well, I think, for creating the sort of radiating center of a flower. And then you can come back with one of your bullet tips to create the stamens. So they're all awesome for doing stuff. Okay, and then if you were to create something like this and you want to come back and mess around with adding your own texture marks to it to make it a little bit different than what comes straight out of the mold, that's what I mostly use these tools for. because, you know, when you're molding in polymer clay, you're often getting something that's really cool, but maybe, you know, I wish there was a little more detail around the edges of the flowers, or I want to enhance it with ink, so I want it to be much more detailed than it already is. I want more texture. Or maybe I want to add some rhinestones, and this part right in the middle, I wish it was deeper and more rounded so that I could set a nice big rhinestone right in the middle. So you can rock and roll this bullet tip there in the center and create a well to be able to put a nice big stone there. So there are so many things that you can do with this rubber tip tool set. I can touch upon them, but I can't explain to you. You know, they're useful for figure sculpting, they're useful for jewelry, they're useful if you make miniatures, miniature foods and things. So check them out in the shop at polymerclaytv.com, and I'm sure that you will find many, many uses for them. Here's one last fun example that I couldn't resist. I've got a piece of clay here that I want to turn into a pod, because pod jewelry is interesting and kind of hot right now. Over at polymerclayadventure.com, we just had a class with Christy Friesen where she did pod style vessels. So, you know, I've got this clay, I want to make a deep well in it to turn it into a pod, and this bullet tip is perfect for that. You can just press the clay right around it with your fingers and use it to create your pod shape. And it's small enough that you can really use your whole fingers to kind of hold it onto the shape, and then it's flexible enough. Look at that. Okay, so if you made something small like this, you could turn this easily into earrings by creating a hole at the top, which I can just leave my tool right in there and poke the hole. So now I have a stringing hole. And then go ahead and bake it. So versatile. Please join us. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, go ahead and subscribe now to Polymer Clay TV for new weekly videos and product demonstrations so that you know how to use all your polymer clay tools for so much fun and inspiration. Have a great week. See you next time.